want to pay for the express shipping. And just go with the free option. Finally. Alright, let's open you up. No, I'd end up cutting open half my props, but on a completely unrelated note, behold! What do you mean, what does it do? I thought you came from a technologically advanced species or something. Never mind, look, I'll show you. Oh my God. But really, what is $10,000 in the grand scheme of things? You're forgetting to count the lemonade stand. Anyway, in this episode of Futures of the Past, the machine stops. Well, if you're talking about this thing, it stops serving a purpose beyond this cold open. But no, today, we'll be talking about E.M. Forster's short story, The Machine Stops, and explore what might happen when man becomes too dependent on his machines. Outside is scary. Outside is still scarier. Edward Morgan Forster was born in London in 1879, and in his lifetime he'd go on to author many classic works like Howard's End, A Room with a View, and A Passage to India. In 1909, he published the science fiction short story The Machine Stops, largely as a counterpoint to the themes of class disparity presented in H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. Now, considering the fact that this story is over 100 years old, it holds up remarkably well. Possibly due in part to the fact that it doesn't fall into the same trap that a lot of classic futurist works do in trying to explain too much about how its technology works. Because after all, the point of the story isn't so much how the machine works, but rather what happens when it stops working. Now, for a bunch of this episode, I'll be reading from the Kindle edition with this, amazing cover art. Eat your heart out, Kelly Freeze. And despite the fact that I'm hardly a professional voiceover artist, I'll try and keep it from getting too boring. So let's just start with the first paragraph and see how it goes. Imagine, if you can, a small room, hexagonal in shape, like the cell of a bee. It is lighted neither by window nor by lamp, yet it is filled with a soft radiance. There are no apertures for ventilation, yet the air is fresh. There are no musical instruments, and yet at the moment my meditation opens, this room is throbbing with melodious sounds. An armchair is in the center, by its side a reading desk. That is all the furniture. And in the armchair there sits a swaddled lump of flesh, a woman about 5 feet high, with a face as white as a fungus. It is to her that the little room belongs. An electric bell rang.
Go away, Baton!
Just kidding. The woman in question is named Vashti, and she lives at an indeterminate point in the future where people spend their days in isolation, their needs met by an omnipresent mechanical entity known only as the Machine. I'm a machine! The bell that she heard was actually a notification for an incoming video chat request from her son. Again, this book is from 1909. To put that in perspective, that's the same year that Googly Elmo Macaroni won the Nobel Prize in Physics. Deep down we all are. But anyway, it seems that her son Kuno has gotten some crazy ideas about leaving the subterranean confines to which mankind has resigned itself for a visit to the surface world. Many of these themes of technological dependency and social isolation appear throughout later works of science fiction. Upon my first reading, I was reminded in particular of George Lucas's 1971 film, THX 1138. Kuno invites his mother to come visit him, even though it's quite a long way and travel itself has fallen out of favor. The world that Forster creates is one of sameness and complacency. By the time we meet our characters, human civilization has become so homogenized that there's little point in traveling from one place to the next. Also, Vashti expresses her dislike of airship travel and of seeing the horrible brown earth, the sea, and worst of all, the stars. You see, Vashti is an author and a lecturer, but she eschews taking inspiration in what she calls the terror of direct experience, and only produces work that is in some way derivative of other works. Meanwhile, her son is something of a freak of nature, an adventurer that seeks out novel experiences, and in an era when it's frowned upon, is something of a physical specimen. Meaning that he can walk up a gentle slope. Seriously, that's how he begins the process of conditioning his body to a point that this society considers downright freakish. One of the things that's interesting about Forster's vision is that it takes a different view from many later science fiction works on the relationship between the intellectual and physical development of a population. So often we're presented with the idea that physical atrophy must necessarily follow increased intelligence. Well, in my own anecdotal experience, that's not really the case. And beyond that, it takes discipline and focus to be an elite athlete. And that would go double in a world in which your every need and desire is met with the push of a button. Now, to her credit, Vashti does eventually work up the nerve to go visit her son, despite his dangerous and potentially heretical ideas. But once there, she's horrified to hear her son express his previously unspeakable thoughts about the changing dynamics of the relationship between man and his machines. We created the machine to do our will, but we cannot make it do our will now. It has robbed us of the sense of touch. It has blurred every human relation and narrowed down love to a carnal act. It has paralyzed our bodies and our wills, and now it compels us to fall down and worship it. Deeply disturbed by her son's words, Vashti immediately flees back to the safe confines of her tiny apartment, and several years pass before she hears from him again. But in the intervening years, two major developments occur, the first of which is a ban on travel to the surface. This doesn't really concern Vashti or most other people, as the desire for such direct experience is generally viewed as vulgar and unnecessary anyway. The second, and more immediately alarming thing, is the rise of literal worship of the machine, complete with prayers and rituals, and the canonization of the technical manual as a holy text. Connect the game console to TV using enclosed AV cable. Configure the TV. Then one day, Vashti receives an unexpected message from her son stating simply, "The machine stops." At first, she dismisses the idea as absurd, unable to comprehend what such a far-fetched scenario would even entail. But then, things begin to gradually go wrong with the machine's operation. Little things at first, like issues with the streaming of the music, the circulation of the air, or the consistency of the lighting. Initially, everyone's confident that the machine will simply repair itself the way it always has in the past. But instead, More and more things continue to go wrong with ever-increasing frequency until, finally, the machine stops. Yeah, so as a piece of futurism, this thing is impressive. First, it doesn't make the same mistake a lot of stories do by setting itself in a specific year, giving it a timeless quality. Secondly, it serves as a cautionary tale about the perils of insulating yourself from direct real-world experience to the extent that when your protective bubble is burst, you have no practical survival skills. Such an approach only serves to make one wholly dependent upon whatever mechanism that's been installed as the provider. And in that reality, one has little choice but to fall down and worship that mechanism. Now, I know I've told you the basic plot of this story, but trust me, I've hardly scratched the surface. It's filled with beautiful writing and positively revolutionary ideas, and I can't recommend it strongly enough for any fan of science fiction. So why don't you go ahead and track down a copy while Oh, I know. Maybe I'll plug this Atari flashback in and have a go. This one's got Space Invaders on it.